Hello, I'm Chris Metherall, and the Natural History Society of Northumbria have asked me if I would make some films about wildflowers in Northumberland. And as a special treat today, we've come to Holy Island, as you can probably see. We're just driving onto the island now. If you come to Holy Island, do make sure that you check the tide tables first. You don't want to get stuck on the island, and you certainly don't want to get stuck in the sea. But we're okay today, so we're going to drive onto the island, which has all sorts of really fascinating plants. Natural History Society used to organise trips to Holy Island in the 19th century, and certainly this last century. It's a place well worth visiting. So we're going to park up on the Snook, which is the western end of the island, and then we'll go into the dunes and see what we can find. I'm sure there will be some orchids, some other really special plants to see. Well, we're going to start off by looking at an orchid. This is one of our commonest orchids in the northeast, and it's quite widespread, and it's particularly widespread on Holy Island. We have lots of it here. This is northern marsh orchid, Dactylorhiza purpurella. And purpurella is a pretty good name for it because it's deep purple. And orchids can be tricksy to tell one from the other. They do hybridise, and that makes them rather awkward, but this one is quite obvious. If you look at the bottom lip of the flowers, called the labellum, you'll see that it's diamond shaped almost. It's rhombic. It's this deep purple colour, and the flowers are quite small. The leaves are unspotted. Occasionally in the northeast, I have to tell you, they do sometimes have spots, which is rather awkward of them, but this one's a nice unspotted example. So this is northern marsh orchid. It doesn't necessarily grow in marshes, but it does like damp places, and undoubtedly it's been rather dry on Holy Island recently, but undoubtedly there is water. If I push my fingers into the turf, it's going to be quite damp down there. So this is our commonest marsh orchid in the northeast, our commonest orchid, northern marsh orchid, Dactylorhiza purpurella. Well, I'm now lying next to one of Holy Island's special plants. This is purple milk vetch, Astragalus danicus, and it's an endangered plant in the UK. I'm pleased to say that our Northumberland populations are holding up pretty well, and it's not common on Holy Island, but it's quite widespread. And I'm looking at a patch which is just outside Snook Tower. There's a well-known place to come and see it. It's a lovely little purple flower. It's a pea flower, so it has the standard pea flower shape of standard at the back and two lateral petals and two keels at the bottom. They're very small, purple, stick up almost vertically, and it has very divided leaves, pinnate leaves, and they're absolutely tiny. The leaves are only, I suppose, 1.5 centimetres long, and the leaflet's probably 5 millimetres. It's called purple milk vetch because it was believed that if you fed it to goats, they would produce more milk. I don't think anybody's ever tried that on Holy Island, but maybe they have. But don't try it now because it's an endangered plant, and we really want to keep as much of it as we can. But it's a lovely plant. It's beautiful purple flowers shining out of the short turf. It's unmissable when you fall over it on Holy Island and on other places too. Purple milk vetch, Astragalus danicus. Well, here I am, sitting in the middle of this fantastic array of plants. Aren't these magnificent? This is Viper's Bugloss Echium vulgare in Latin. And as you can see, they're the most fantastic electric blue spires, and they're really quite common on Holy Island. And this year they're doing really, really well, as you can see. And this is not just the only patch on Holy Island. I can see another one over there, and another one over there. They're magnificent. And they say they have this electric blue colour, and if you look at them closely, you can see that the stamens are a rather deep shade of pinky red. and that just sets them off, I think. It just contrasts so well with the blue. They're related to forget-me-nots. It's the borage family, related to borage, but I don't suggest you put this in your pims. And you need to be a little bit careful because some people are slightly allergic to the hairiness of the plants. They are quite rough, hairy, but they're the most beautiful things. You could grow these in your garden, couldn't you? They're much better than foxgloves any day. Viper's Bugloss Echium vulgare. Well, here I am, lying down on the job again, but in this case it's so that I can show you this plant, which is called Butterwort Pinguicula vulgaris in Latin. And it's a very recognisable plant. As you can see, it has these absolutely lime green leaves. I mean, it's just stick out from the rest of the grass and the surrounding herbage. You can see them very easily indeed, even when they're not flowering. The flowers themselves are rather pretty. They're in a family all of their own, but these deep purple flowers, sometimes only one stem in the middle of a rosette, but these are doing really well, and I can see one over there that's got 7 or even 8 flowering stems growing out of the centre. And these are carnivorous. No, they don't eat fingers, they only eat flies. And what they do is they have a sticky substance on the surface of the leaf which attracts small insects, thrips and things like that, and when the leaf rolls up, the insect gets digested, it unrolls, and the exoskeleton, which the fly can't digest, just blows away. And the reason they do that is because they live in waterlogged places. It's very damp here underneath the dune slack, and waterlogged soils lack nitrates, and so these plants have to replace their nitrates in some other way, and they do that by catching insects and getting their nitrates through their carnivorous activities. So this is Butterwort Pinguicula vulgaris. Well, this is early marsh orchid. We've seen Dactylorhiza purpurella, the northern marsh orchid. This is Dactylorhiza incarnata, and the typical form, as you can see, is a light pink colour. It's often described as dead men's flesh, which actually is a very apt description. This is quite pinky. They can be difficult to tell from northern marsh orchid, so I thought it would be useful to go through the details. Northern marsh orchid, the leaves are usually unspotted. Sometimes in the north they can have spots on, but early marsh orchid always unspotted, and the leaves are hooded. If I touch them at the ends, there's a distinct hood at the end of the leaf, much more hooded than the northern marsh. But what really usually separates them is if you look at the flowers. And if you look at the bottom lip of each flower, you can see that on this plant, the early marsh orchid, the sides of the lip are swept back like wings, whereas in the northern marsh orchid they're flat. And so if you look at this from the front, each flower looks really narrow. It's not, because the sides are swept back, but that's the way it looks. They come in 3 colours. Well, actually they come in more than 3 colours, but on Northumberland they come in 3 colours. This dead men's flesh colour was a brick red one, and they also come in the same sort of purple that you get for northern marsh. They're supposed to be subspecies, but they seem to grow together on Holy Island, so, well, the taxonomists say they're subspecies at the moment, so we'll stick with that. But this is early marsh orchid. Flowers, despite its name, just about at the same time as northern marsh, maybe a little earlier in the northeast. Dactylorhiza incarnata. Right, well, I'm standing next to a rather nasty plant now. All plants are lovely, but some plants are lovelier than others, and this one, I'm afraid, comes pretty close to the bottom of the list, not on loveliness, but on irritation. This is Piri-Piri Burr. It's from New Zealand. Its Latin name is Acaena novae-zelandiae, and that tells you that it's an alien. We think it probably came in through wool shoddy on the Tweed Valley, but it's ended up on Holy Island, and it's absolutely everywhere on the island, and it's a really nasty invasive thug. It's really difficult to get rid of, and what's worse is it's really difficult to get rid of off your boots and your trousers, because although when it's flowering it's reasonably pretty, small white globular heads of flowers, not too bad, but when it's seeding it has really quite sharp spines, but spines which will stick on your clothes. Each seed has 3 of them, and if you get it on your boots and your trousers, it's really difficult to get off. In the late summer, you see dogs on Holy Island and they're covered with burrs from Piri-Piri Burr. It must be so uncomfortable, and because it gets on people, it's got all over Northumberland. It's on the top of the Cheviots. It's every tourist spot practically, because 1 million people came to Holy Island last year, and you feel like most of them must have got Piri-Piri Burr on their boots. So it's a very common plant on the island, so I really need to show you, but do be careful with it when you come off the island. If you're here in August or late July or September, you will get this on your feet, and if it gets into your garden you'll never get rid of it. It's a real invasive thug. Piri-Piri Burr Acaena, novae-zelandiae. Well, for our last plant we're going to look at a plant which is quite common on Holy Island and indeed all over Northumberland, up and down the coast. So it's not a particularly special plant, but it's an example of a type of plant which we haven't seen yet, and that is the composites. This is mouse ear hawkweed. I'm going to pick one because there's lots of them about, and you can immediately see that it looks like a dandelion. And you'll be forgiven for thinking I've only got one flower in my hand, but what is clever about these is that each one of these yellow things that look like petals, we call them ligules, is in fact a separate flower. And if I pull them apart a bit, hold them in my hand, I can see that each one has got stamens, it's got anthers, it's got all the usual paraphernalia that a flower has. And so in this one head I've probably got 50 flowers, and that's one of the reasons that these are such successful plants, is because one flowering head can produce sometimes 100 or even 150 different flowers. It's very easy to spot. Dandelions, yellow dandelion-like plants, are notoriously difficult to tell one from the other. This is very easy because if you look at the leaves you can see that it's got long white hairs on the leaves, and it's really our only yellow composite that does that. Called mouse ear hawkweed. Mouse ear is rather a common name for English name for plants, and its Latin name is Pilosella officinarum, and officinarum means it's an apothecary's plant. The original office was the apothecary's shop, and so as soon as you hear the name officinarum you know it must be good for something, and this has appeared in herbals since the 16th century as a remedy for coughs. I haven't tried it. I don't know whether it works or not. I suspect it doesn't. But Pilosella officinarum, this is our first composite. Well, I hope you've enjoyed Holy Island. We'll probably come back in a couple of weeks' time, maybe a month's time, and we'll see some more orchids, because there are going to be different ones coming out over the next few weeks. So I suspect we'll be back, but for the moment, from Holy Island, I hope you've enjoyed it.